Welcome back to another episode of The Cutting Room Floor. Had a lot of really cool feedback this week from several people who have been watching the episodes. Thank you guys. We hope that this is a blessing, really, to people who are watching. We had one of our church members say that it felt like we were hanging out with them while they were while they were working one day. That's awesome. That's kind of what these are intended to be. It's kind of like a virtual small group time. And so, if ever you're kind of like screaming an answer at us because we don't know it right off the top of our heads, feel free to shoot that in the comments and let us know. If you do have any questions or anything like that, please find us on a Sunday or comment down below. We'd love to answer any of the questions that we can. I think this week we're going to try to do our best to kind of do 2 weeks in a row here or something like that. We might have one available next week, but chances are not because I'm going out of town. But we're going to try to compress 2 episodes into one. So let's not make this 4 hours.
Yeah, good luck.
If we can.
Yeah. So, a lot of this will be, I'm assuming maybe first half will be stuff that we talked about last week a little bit more in depth, and just moving ahead will be the subsequent week.
Yeah.
So, just so you know, I have questions.
And I want to talk.
Okay, cool. So, when I was listening on Sunday, then there's always things that are kind of pinging, and we're talking throughout the week as you're writing stuff. Sunday morning, it always changes. And then I listen to it again, and then there's new stuff. I have a question.
Okay.
About, Jacob wrestles with God. Mm-hmm. I guess we should say we're at Genesis chapter 28.
Right.
And afterwards, there's this dialogue between him and this guy that he wrestles, and who are you? Tell me your name, and all this stuff. Bless me. Mm-hmm. And it kind of occurred to me, why does Jacob say things like, if you bless me, then you will be my God. Or if you bless me, then I will give you a tenth. And then we can kind of see that turn into a tithe later. And here's my question, I guess. My proposition is that is Jacob, we talked about his name meaning like heel catcher, usurper, deceiver, all that stuff. With that in mind, is there almost like a 3-tiered thing going on as far as the way Jacob positions himself? So up to this point where he wrestles, then he's taken the birthright from his brother. Mm-hmm. He's schemed his way into the blessing.
Right.
And now he's telling, as he wrestles with the Lord, if you do this, then I will. Yeah. And that seemed odd to me. It kind of took me a minute to say, it's God. What does God care about 10% of anything that you own? And tithing is important, I think we understand that. I don't need to unpack that right now. But to me, I was thinking about it, if I had something, let's say valuable in my home and my kids are horsing around and it breaks.
Right.
And let's say it's something, expensive. My kid could reach in their pocket and pull out, 2 pennies, a nickel, and a button.
Yeah.
And it's not enough for it. But
that.
the gesture is valuable,
Yeah.
And so I get that as far as and you mentioned it on Sunday, that this is a demonstration of his faith in God.
Right.
Mike, this is a long lead up to a question. When he says if, so far, beginning in Abraham, we've had, through your line, this will be, you will inherit this land and you will be a blessing to all nations. There is a promised son through your wife, Sarai, who's coming. And we see that happen. And then that happens again. The blessing goes to Isaac. And there's a promised son again. And now we have a different kind of problem. Because what we saw before that is Abraham and Sarai, they try to make a family on their own through Hagar, and that's a whole big mess. So he has 2 sons, but there's the distinct son of promise.
Right.
We have a different circumstance now because for Jacob, he has 2 sons, but we're dealing with twins. Yeah. So Jacob has worked his way into firstborn inheritance through bartering and scheming with his brother, blessing through scheming with his mom and deceiving his dad. But now he's dealing with the Lord. And so I'm wondering, this is my actual question, is Jacob inheriting this this promise from Abraham and his dad that says that, yeah, through our line there will be a blessing. And is he having to reckon with, well, is it me or my brother? You know, according to my brother, it's mine now. He gave it to me. According to my dad, well, he blessed me. What about God? Whose line will God continue to carry the promise through? So if he says, if you pick me, then you will be my God. If you pick me, is he not saying, you know, not just if you give me possessions, but if I am the inheritor of the promise, I'll set you up as my God. Is that what he's asking for?
Yeah, okay. So I think there's like a couple things going on there. Number one, I think your question almost contains the answer, which is, I think, yes. You know, simply put, yes. I think that Jacob is seeking to understand through whom the blessing will route. I think there's a reason that Rebekah schemes, because she's the one who received the word from the Lord.
Right.
I would imagine she's talked to Isaac about that. But even still, Isaac seems to be set on blessing Esau. And whether that's because of their relationship or because of cultural values, we don't know. This text doesn't tell us. That's why it's fun to kind of, you know, do this digging like this. But Rebekah heard from God when she inquired of him about what's going on, you know, with this jostling and this kind of fighting. Obviously, we've never given birth, but I would imagine there's probably some kind of sense or feeling that she has that this is not just normal motion or movement. They're probably kicking each other and moving around or whatever. I don't know any of that, but that's my assumption. And so she inquires of the Lord about this. It seems to be not just regular baby movement in her womb, and so she knows that God's promise is for the older to be stronger, but the younger to rule over. And so I wonder if a part of her scheming is, we don't know the conversations, we don't know what's happened outside of this moment, but for some reason Rebekah feels compelled to do the scheme as opposed to talking to Isaac.
Right.
So we can't speculate too far or too hard about what that means. But yes, it makes you wonder, does Jacob think that his blessing is legitimate? Rachel was asking me, my wife was asking me this past week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, doesn't Isaac intend to bless Esau? Like,
I would think so.
You know?
Yeah, and if you compare it all to the way that the Lord continues to bless, like, you know, he did it with Isaac, and when Abraham advocates for Ishmael,
yes,
he blesses him too.
Right.
So, I mean, you would think that, and
Yes.
it seems like that would be his natural inclination too, because it seems like he maybe favors Esau's vibe, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's
however
probably a
you
good
want
way
to
of
put
putting
it.
it.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good
So, and then even Esau's response afterwards is he's crying out and begging, "Can't you bless also me? Bless me." That, you know, there's something substantial about receiving a blessing.
Yes.
And what are the conditions that? Well, why can't he just bless both?
So so it's a good question. So first, let me keep that in your brain because we need to answer that too. Because I think what's going on with the whole, you know, Isaac being able to be the receiver of that blessing is really interesting, because just like we've been talking about in the Trinity stuff, you know, on Sunday mornings, we've been talking about how you can't go on a date with Cindy and call her Sally. You need to know the identity of the person that you're worshiping, and Jesus is the second member of the Trinity. We've talked about all this stuff. So it's important for us to know the identity of the person. Is Isaac not intending to identify Esau in his blessing? And I think he is, because that's why the whole deception is necessary, right? So why is it that Isaac still receives that? And I don't know if it's because the words themselves have power in that sense, or if it's because God's plans are being realized via the scheming of Rebekah and Jacob. Now, does that mean that God is okay with their scheming? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think that God would want things to be on the up and up, right? To live above reproach, as the New Testament would call us to do. So couldn't there have been something more righteous that that Rebekah or Jacob had done in order to receive that blessing? I'm sure that all that's possible. But I think the theme that we're seeing so far is that despite what humanity does, God will work around or through or in, however we want to phrase that, in order to turn for good what things might have been intended for bad.
Yeah, I like the way that you put it on Sunday when you pose it. The question is, are you going to be someone that God works with
Yes.
or works around to accomplish his purposes? And I think you're right in like, what would have been favorable would be
Yes.
for Rebecca to go to Isaac and be like,
Yes.
hey, the Lord told me this, bless this son or whatever. But for whatever reason, I mean, and maybe it's a justified reason in her her mind, like, well, look at the favoritism between sons or the tradition of the firstborn, or even looking at, the lineage of the story is there's an awful lot of deceiving and scheming going on. So maybe she has reason to believe that a genuine petition wouldn't cut it.
Wouldn't work.
And though they accomplished what they set out to do, it was not the right thing to do.
Yeah. Which there's just tension. I think there's just tension in the story, and I don't know that we're meant to resolve every tension. And we're going to talk about that actually on this coming Sunday, so I don't want to wade too far into that thing that I want to say about that. But there's just tension apparent in the story, and I think what we're supposed to see is not perfect characters perfectly executing perfect morality. We're supposed to see a perfect God who perfectly executes his plans. And I think that despite whatever humanity does, he can work within that. Now, should there have been a better way to do it? Sure. But it ends up that Isaac doesn't retract the blessing, which maybe that is a cultural value that God is working within, because you can't retract blessings, no matter who's the person sitting in front of you that receives it. Whether or not you intended to give it to somebody else, it might just be that the words spoken are the words spoken, and there's kind of nothing for it, which would kind of be my assumption about what's going on here. So how is it that Jacob receives the blessing? I think it's because God is working through the cultural form to have him blessed through the deception, even though the deception is not the right thing to do. It's not that Jacob still won't receive that. It's because the words are spoken, period. And that's why Esau is in such, dire straits emotionally.
Right.
Why he's crying out, begging, because he recognizes too that the thing has already been done. Now, what is interesting, going back up to your question now, because we got to get back to tithes still yet.
Yeah.
But going back to your other question that you asked about, well, can't it be that others are blessed? I think that's kind of the major point of this idea of unique. It's not that Isaac was the only son. It's that he's the unique son, the chosen son. It's not that Esau can't be blessed. Mm-hmm. It's that Jacob is the chosen one.
Right.
So I think election, as we're starting to see it kind of brought up doctrinally so far in the story, is not about only. It's about unique. And we need to keep hammering this idea.
Yeah.
Because even as we get into the later nation of Israel story, right, this covenant stuff distills down further. Because it is God through one family,
right?
But then that family becomes a nation.
Yeah.
Well, then God has to now restrain that again back to a family.
Mm-hmm.
And he does that through the tribe, through one of the 12 sons that we'll find out about through the story.
Right.
Through Judah specifically, who's not the firstborn. Again.
Yeah. I was talking with my wife about this last night. Like, it's odd.
Yeah. This theme keeps replaying. Cain is not the one who does the right, who's the firstborn.
Yeah.
It's Abel who's the secondborn who does the right thing. It's not the firstborn of Noah, which the name is it Ham? I think it's Ham. Yeah. It's not the firstborn Ham who's doing right. It's Shem.
Yeah.
Who's doing the right thing. And so God is messing with this cultural norm.
Yeah.
He's subverting it.
Yeah.
Which will actually become a very big theme for us in Exile, subversion. But Judah is the particular tribe, and then we learn it's David who's the particular family.
We kind of do this.
Yes, which I think is actually the motion of Scripture all throughout, actually.
Yeah.
That it goes to the particular in order to go universal, comes back to particular to go to universal, and I think that's the way God wants to work just throughout the entire story. Now, can others be blessed? I think what we've seen with Ishmael and with Esau is actually that, yes, they can be blessed. And what we'll see later on is that these other tribes are blessed as well, even though they're not the chosen one through whom the chosen Messiah, the snake crusher, we don't know Messiah word yet, but we know snake crusher is going to come. And so it's like this for maybe a more modern time. Billy Graham was chosen for a particular thing. Aren't there other faithful preachers, you
Yeah.
know, who are sharing the gospel and pouring their lives out for Jesus, you know, in Billy Graham's day? Of course there were.
Yeah.
It's not like he was the only faithful preacher. It's just
Yeah.
that he was chosen for a specific thing.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm wondering, because like even, if you jump forward, once Jacob does, see Esau again, he's a mighty man. He has
Yeah.
400 men
Yes.
with him, and he's wealthy and all this stuff. And that kind of makes me wonder too, well, as Esau's life is unfolding, in the wake of not having received his father's blessing, but still becoming a great people within himself, how could he not look at himself and go, well, in some ways, I am blessed. But that's what I think that's the distinction I'm trying to make is, well, he got what he wanted from his brother. He got what he wanted from his father. What is it that he's asking for as he wrestles with God?
Okay.
Not just to be blessed as far as, having many descendants and being a great nation and all that stuff that the other brothers throughout the stories and previous generations also do, but to be the line that carries out God's promise, I think is what's on the table.
Yeah, and so back to the if idea. I, before studying for this, would have taken the view that Jacob is trying to manipulate God in his if proposition. But then I began reading and studying, and I find out that the majority position on this in scholarship is with some interesting Hebrew background stuff. This if vow actually is a part of the vow structures moving forward. Now, a vow is different than a covenant, okay? So whatever Jacob is doing right now is essentially trying to set up a relationship that is distinct from the covenant relationship that God has already appointed. So what Jacob is doing right now is not manipulation. It's that he's creating the ask in order for God's character to be revealed to him. Because so far in the story, God has not revealed himself. God has not appeared. God is not tested.
Right.
Isaac and Abraham had those benefits. You know what I'm trying to say?
So you think Jacob sees this moment as, this is my moment to, I guess not even make an appeal is the way to put it. But I guess, is what you're saying,
though.
But I guess not in a transactional sense, in a relational sense.
In a relational sense.
So it's not if you do this, I hand you this, you hand me that.
No.
It's if we partner together.
Yes.
Okay, I'm following.
Then I'm established as one of your covenant partners.
Right.
And it's similar to what God does in Genesis chapter 17. Okay, so we have Genesis 15, where we have the covenant where God, the smoking fire pot and the torch on fire, passes through the covenant. Abraham's over here. He's not even the one that passes through the covenant, although he's the benefactor of the covenant that God strikes with him. However, he doesn't have to take on the oaths in the same way. However, 2 chapters later, circumcision, there are stipulations, there are ifs, if you want to put it that way, for Abraham to carry out. And it's not as though if Abraham doesn't do this, God's cutting him off necessarily, okay? But it's that if you will partner with me in this way, right, then you will receive my presence, my blessing in a I don't know if direct fashion's the right way, but a more settled way, a more comprehensive way.
I think that makes sense though, because then we've talked a lot about like the theme of they walked with God, and it's like, if you want to see those plans of God or the blessing that he's giving to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all that stuff fulfilled, well, the way to see that is to be in step with God.
Yeah.
So
there seemed to be, in other words, in the same way that Abraham has to walk by faith, there are responsibilities in relationships. That's kind of the way we've been framing it around here. And so I think that's what Jacob is trying to do, is he's indicating the responsibilities of the two parties. And what I think is fascinating is that what he's asking for, it might seem like a lot, but actually it's the bare minimum. Jacob's asking for clothes. He's asking for food. He's asking to return home.
Which is interesting because he's alone at this moment and assuming that things are about to go well for him.
Yeah, well, and that's a safe assumption. He's in
Yeah,
the wilderness.
yeah.
And he doesn't know if when he gets to Haran, things are going to be okay.
Uh-huh.
He doesn't know how Laban's household is. In fact, that's his first question when he gets to the well there in Haran. I assume, presumably to drink water because he's been wandering through the wilderness this whole time. So, he doesn't know the future. And so I think a part of what he's trying to frame up is, okay, Abraham and Isaac had a promise. You've now given me that promise. These are the stipulations of our promise. Does that make sense?
Right.
I think it's more like that than it's like, well, if you'll do that, and
Right.
then maybe I'll consider. I don't think, at least the majority position in scholarship is that his vow is real.
Yeah.
His vow is real. And so, I find it really interesting that like I said at the Sunday, as I open God's Word, it keeps messing with me. I keep encountering a different way of viewing it.
Right.
The more that I study and the more that I get in, and sometimes the plain words of Scripture are not as plain as they might appear at first, simply because I'm disconnected from the culture, so far removed from the language and the ideas and concepts that they have embedded, that I'm unable to see past my own cultural milieu,
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's going on here. And so then that goes to the tithe, because that was the other thing you brought up.
Right.
Is Jacob bargaining in order, and I'll promise one simple thing. Well, we haven't talked yet about Melchizedek.
We mention it every time.
And I'm kicking myself now that I've kind of passed over this chapter, because it really is important. So maybe we ought to do a little bit of back work. We don't have to spend forever on this, but maybe we can jump right to Genesis 14 and talk about some of the Melchizedek stuff, because I think what's going on here is that even though Jacob hasn't had an encounter with God the way that Abraham and Isaac have, it doesn't mean he's not familiar with the stories. I think he's familiar with the stories and what God has covenanted and promised to do through this family. So I'm sure he's heard of this guy that Abraham encountered back in Genesis chapter 14. And I think that what Jacob is doing is he's telegraphing. He's forecasting.
Right.
But it's an oath forecast. It's not a if you do this, I'll begrudgingly give you my 10%. I think what's actually on offer here is that Jacob is trying to display his faith in what God has told him there in chapter 28, that the reiteration of the covenant and promise.
Right.
To Abraham and Isaac. I think what he's telling God in return is, okay, if our partnership is for real, then I'm going to offer this as a sign of my faith displayed. My faith is true because I believe that you can do these things for me, but I will demonstrate that. I will demonstrate that in the tithe, okay? And so that brings us, I think, back to this idea of tithing, this giving back to God in order to worship, in order to, I don't know what the right word is at this moment, in order to demonstrate my faith.
Right.
I'm not positive. Maybe you can help us, kind of draw that out. But maybe we ought to look back at Genesis 14 to get kind of a framework here.
Yeah, I think before we do, I do have to point out,
Okay.
I made a mistake reference-wise.
In the wrestling?
Yeah.
Wrestling happens a few chapters later.
So 28 is
The stairway.
The stairway, which I also want to talk about, just to clarify. So
Yeah,
we'll
for
jump
sure.
back there in a
Well,
minute because I have
yeah.
more stuff. But I do want to hear about Melchizedek.
So okay, Lot is down in this plain of Shinar, which is the same plain as Babel, which is interesting. So some kind of test or choice here, I think, on offer. I don't really know if we have time to explore that, but Lot is down there, and what happens are a group of kings want to fight another group of kings. Okay, essentially, they fight. Lot gets taken. Because Lot was a blessed person. We know that from the former chapters, actually the former chapter in chapter 13 of Genesis, where Abraham and Lot have to separate from Abram and Lot have to separate from one another because their possessions have grown so large. So we know that Lot is a blessed guy. So now he's living down in this fertile valley area. These kings fight one another, and Lot gets taken captive.
Now, question about that. So when they do decide to like part company and all that stuff, then there's which way are you going to go? And Abraham says, whichever way you go, I'll go the opposite way.
Yeah.
And remind me, is it right that Lot kind of sees an area that is, plentiful or whatever, but it's also nearer to places where bad stuff has already happened,
Yes. Yes, it is. So it's near to this. Okay, so it's in the same valley as this. It is a little to the east, near the Dead Sea area.
Okay.
And we hear about that a couple of chapters later. So we don't yet have the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah happening yet, but we do see that Lot choose the preferable, at least to vision, right? Which again is a whole issue throughout the whole Bible. The idea of seeing something.
And it kind of fits with the rest of Lot's story that we get, is that he's
Yes.
willing to be adjacent to or near these
Right.
places and cities that he can do well in, but it's not the right place to be.
I like that you just brought that up. That's not even a thought I've thought of.
And I think it continues, throughout the biblical, think about someone like, oh gosh, why is it leaving my head? Strong guy, long
Samson.
hair. Samson.
Yeah.
Samson, he has the Nazirite vow, but where does he spend his days? They're not supposed to have anything from the vine,
Yes.
but he spends his day walking through the vineyards. He's like, well, he's not doing his stuff, but he's right there.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, this is something that, humans do. We get as close as
time.
we
All
can
the time.
and convince ourselves that,
It's okay. I'm not doing it.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've not even thought of that as kind of a continuing theme, that Lot is flirting with the line,
Yeah.
Lot's flirting.
Yeah.
And Samson surely flirts with the
Oh,
line
yes.
the whole way. And he's hanging out with the Philistines.
Yeah.
Is another thing that he's doing
Yeah.
that he's not supposed to be doing. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff.
He's a concentrated individual of a human problem.
Yes, he is. He's very compromised.
Yeah.
Okay, so they split, they separate. Kings fight. Lot gets taken, and I would assume Lot gets taken because he's a blessed guy, right?
Okay.
And so they take him probably, well, for lots of reasons, but essentially I think they want to take his stuff, okay? So then Abraham marshals a group of guys, and he goes to essentially do like a night rescue of Lot. So there's like tar pits involved. There's some interesting story going on there. But anyway, Abraham goes in, he rescues Lot, he defeats some of these kings, and then on his way out of that valley, they come across the city of Salem, okay? If you're like, I don't know what Salem is, well, because we have not yet heard that this is the same city that will later become Jerusalem, okay? So this is Jerusalem. It's just not called Jerusalem yet, okay? So what happens is while they're going back to, I think the area of Gerar, which is where they're living at the time.
Right.
Okay, they pass by the city of Salem. Okay, Melchizedek, who's the king of Salem, so he's the king of peace, because that's what Salem means.
Right.
Okay, so there's all kinds of typological things happening here. So in the same way that Abraham is a type, he's what we're supposed to replicate as far as like a type of how we're supposed to have faith in God. Melchizedek is also modeling a type. Okay, so this random guy comes out to the valley, and he comes to give Abraham a blessing. Okay, but Abraham recognizes who he is in some way, because what we're told in verse, is it 18? Yeah, in verse 18. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. You kidding me?
Yeah.
Melchizedek, the king of peace, brings out bread and wine. So clearly there are some, we don't know this yet unless we read the New Testament, but anyway, if you read the New Testament, anyway, okay, so this is all mapping onto Jesus already. Now, this is the next thing we find out. So he's a king. There's the next thing. He was a priest of God Most High. And we're not talking about just any old God here. Okay, now he's not of Abraham's family. So, we could assume that he's, a pagan person, or that he's one of these nations that's separated from Yahweh. We find out his name later, God's name later, Yahweh. We find out, or he could be one of these that maybe is being led by a spiritual being who is leading their people towards faithfulness to God. Okay, it could be that, or it could be that God has talked to this dude individually. We don't know. That's the whole point. He's kind of shrouded in mystery. We hear about him twice in the Old Testament and like twice in the New Testament. So he's kind of an interesting guy. And in fact, we read one of the other references of Melchizedek actually this past week in Psalm 110.
Yeah.
So, okay, King of Peace comes out, bread and wine. He's bringing that out to Abraham. Okay, he was a priest, so he's a king priest of God Most High. So there's all kinds of typological stuff mapping onto who we're going to see later in the story. And he blessed Abram, saying, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High," which is the same God that Abram worships, creator of heaven and earth. "And praise be God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand." Okay, then Abram gave him a tenth of everything. Okay, and that's all we hear about this story. Okay, it's kind of obscure, it's an obscure moment, but it's interesting that we are seeing one of the people of the neighboring nations who worships God the Creator, who's at peace with Abram when Abram is doing the right thing, when he's walking with God. Okay, so I think that's a part of the thing that's going on in this story. The other thing that's interesting, though, is that the king priest doesn't come to tithe to Abram, even though Abram's the victor and he's the one blessed by God and all these things. It's actually that Abram is in the lower of positions in the situation, and this king of Salem, Melchizedek, is the one who's being offered to. Okay, now we won't know the information of this story until much later on, but I think what Abram learned here, and maybe what the subsequent generations learned, is that it is appropriate to demonstrate my faith in God by returning something that he has blessed me with. Okay? And here Melchizedek is modeling for us how things are supposed to operate, and Abram are modeling for us how things are supposed to work. So then when we get to Genesis 28, I think Jacob is mapping upon this story. God has come and spoken to me. He's given me a blessing.
Right.
He's shown up in, a kind of an alternate way, a reversal of Babel way with the staircase. And now in return, I'm going to do what Abram did with Melchizedek, the king priest of peace. I'm going to offer a tithe.
Because you ought to.
Because you ought to.
Okay. So one question before we jump back to 28, as far as the identity of this very mysterious person. I already know where you stand on this. I just want to hear it explained.
Yeah.
So, you're saying he is this king priest.
Yep.
There's the bread, there's the wine. We've spent a lot of time talking about the angel of the Lord. Who is that? When we look at something like this, who is Melchizedek?
So I might surprise you. I don't think this is an angel of the Lord appearance.
I knew you were going to say that.
Okay, so I'm not going to surprise you at all. This is not.
I just want you to clarify.
Good, thank you. This is not a Christophany.
Okay.
This is just a guy, a righteous guy, a good guy. But this is not the angel of the Lord.
Okay.
This is a guy who is obeying God's command on his life, well, whatever that it looks like. Well, clearly to be a king and a priest.
Right.
And to worship God in an appropriate way, and also to carry that worship outside of himself and his place to others, to bless them, which is the original call of every image bearer, right? That's what he's doing. He's fulfilling the image-bearing role, which is that I'm going to bless you to make you a blessing. Now, that was maybe particular to Abram, but it's also the universal call of all humanity, right? That God is going to bless us with a place like Eden so that we'll spread that blessing outward.
And when we do set ourselves up to be adequate image bearers of God, then that is the effect of
Absolutely.
it. So he is a person, but imaging God in the same way that when we look at Abraham goes to sacrifice Isaac, or King David or Moses or whoever it is who is acting as this intercessory
mediator, whatever you want to say.
It is a life that for this moment images what it is Christ will ultimately accomplish.
Which we see with Abram and Abraham's story as well. It's the same exact kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this character becomes a significant a benchmark point for the later New Testament authors who are going to talk about the uniqueness of Jesus, how he is the Son of God, and how that ties into the lineage of Abraham, because again, Paul and crew are going to have to deal with what does it mean that we have a Jewish Messiah? What does it mean that we have this law from God? What does it mean that we have Abraham as our father? So they're going to have to deal with all these topics, and they're going to appeal to stories like this, where Abraham is giving a tenth of his stuff as a demonstration of his faith to God before the law ever occurred. And so they're going to have to,
Right.
so there's going to have to be, not, I don't want to say uncoupling because that's not the right word, but there's going to have to be some kind of hand holding that occurs where the law is not abrogated, meaning it's not gotten rid of.
Right.
But in some way, the New Testament and the New Covenant that Jesus brings about and the Old Covenant with Abraham and with Moses are going to have to shake hands in some way. We're getting way ahead of ourselves here.
Right.
Because this all deals with the theme of exile too, but and it's the main story of the Bible, but that's what they're going to be dealing with, and they're going to appeal to stories like this in order to cement that handshake, whatever that handshake looks like, especially as Gentiles are now coming into the family of God.
Right. This has been super interesting to me lately, and especially as we're working our way through Genesis, but like when you do see things that are demonstrations of what will be in the law, but pre the law.
Right.
And I think what's kind of occurred to me is that, like, okay, there's been references to clean and unclean animals. There's been references to sacrifices. There's this tithing thing that's going on. And what that really does is it kind of pulls you out of the context. Like, those things have a purpose outside of, well, this is what you do and what you don't do.
Oh, very well said.
It shows us and reminds us again that this has something to do with relationship and conduct between people, and that really comes down to, you've said it many, many times very well, as far as there's something underneath the law.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, when we see things like this happening before we're given the list of what to do and don't do, it's already being demonstrated and for a purpose.
Yes. The way you said that is so well said, and the way that Paul will say that, and I think you've been studying Galatians, so this is like primed in your brain right now, but like the way that Paul will talk about this is that there's a letter of the law. Okay, those are the rules, those are the things we're supposed to do and not do, but there's a spirit of the law that's kind of undergirding that thing. And even Jesus, I'm reading right now in my daily reading, I'm in the New Testament now, and so I'm reading now the Sermon on the Mount this morning.
Right.
And it's like Jesus is saying continually, you've heard it said, but now I tell you.
Yeah.
It's like he's pointing out that the law is not bad. That's a good thing. But he's trying to go past the letter of the law into the reason the letter is even written.
Yeah.
Which is the spirit of the law. So for instance, you've heard it said, don't murder. I say, don't even hate.
Yeah.
Jesus is trying to get down into the heart. And I think that exactly what you just said, oh gosh, I love that you said that. It wasn't even on my brain to say that. It's so wonderful. That what's happening here are these prefigurings of the spirit. Like, this is what relationship looks like. An appropriate relationship does look like demonstrations of action. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And this is what the New Testament's going to play with faith versus works and all that stuff. But man, I love that you said that.
Yeah, and just to flesh it out one layer deeper is like, when Jesus says, well, I say to you, don't murder, don't even hate. It's not just that he's there to up the ante. Like, the stakes are higher than you think they are. They're stricter than you think they are. It should be producing something in you.
Yes.
To get rid of murder in my heart.
That's right.
Means that my conduct to my brother is different.
Absolutely.
So I guess a holding to the letter of the law, which you already can't do, does not save you.
Right.
Christ does, but to appeal to trying to work out the law for what purpose?
Right.
To put an A+ on my test, or so that I can walk away with something in my head and in my heart, if that makes sense.
It does, and we're going to get there, but I think maybe the quickest way of summarizing all of this is that the Old Testament has a way that we relate with God, okay? We're seeing it even prefigured before the law even shows up. We are seeing that there are appropriate actions that are commiserate with the way that I would have a relationship with God. It's all based on faith. I mean, that's the example of Enoch and Noah and now Abraham, most poignantly. But we do get to the Mosaic Law. This covenant does get distilled down into the creation of this nation eventually. And, without belaboring this point, let's say it this way. That's the way to relate to God in the Old Testament. But when we get to the New Testament, we have a new covenant. And there's going to be a new way that we're going to relate to God. And Jesus himself will say it, that all the law and the prophets can be summed up in this. love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Because if you'll do that, like you were just saying,
Right.
it's not as though Jesus is trying to up the ante on the law. He's trying to go inside the law.
Right. Yeah.
And point out that the law is fulfilled as a result of my love. And so now the way that I relate to God in the New Testament is based upon faith in Christ, generated by love. And if I will love God and others, then why would I ever want to murder or hate my brother at all?
Right.
And in fact, Jesus would say, love your enemy and pray for them. It's like, there's something profound, truly profound about the way that Jesus is, I don't know, judoing.
Yeah. He's reorienting everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for saying it that way. Yeah, he's reorienting the way that we relate to God. And so anyway, we got to talk about all that as we go throughout this series. I don't know if we're ever going to get to the Gospel of John. We will. But yeah, I mean, this is so important. And eventually we're going to talk about what that handshake looks like, what the relationship to the Old Testament that a Christian now possesses. Because there's a lot of confusion out there. And rightly so, because we've got a big, long text to deal with. And a lot of the text is the Old Testament. So what's now my relationship to the Old Testament? Clearly and obviously it's God's Word. And it is trying to teach us something. But what is it that Jesus instructs us that it is teaching, or that its purpose is? Yeah. And that's why the New Testament is so important for us, because it answers that question that the Old Testament poses. And we're going to get there. We're going to get there more and more as we go. But we're still in Genesis. Yeah. I feel like we're going to be in this story for a long, long time. We just went
backwards, too.
Yeah, we just went backwards. So. But yeah, King Melchizedek is a really important figure. And we even read about this last week in Psalm 110. The Messiah is going to come as one who is like the King of Peace, who brings bread and wine, who even says the same thing that David says in Psalm 110. Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And praise be to God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand. That's like the very first thing said in Psalm 110. Like,
this is like a goosebump moment for me.
Like these writers, and then like we don't have time for Psalm 110 right now, but it's post-exile is when that is finding its arrangement in the story. And so these post-exilic people who are now dealing with the reality of we're not back in the kingdom the way that we thought we were going to be as a result of what the prophets told us. How do we still stay faithful to God, even though we're not in the ideal situation, even though we haven't re-inherited the land the way that we thought we would? Yeah. How do we worship God and look for this Messiah figure that the prophets have told us about? Well, we know it's going to be King David's, descendant. So is that psalm talking about King David, or is it talking about this Messiah descendant? And so all this worship gets rolled up into a person that's going to look like the King of Peace, who brings bread and wine, who will announce that the enemies are defeated. So I wonder who that's going to be. Yeah. It's so cool.
That is so good. That is so good. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like we should end the episode right here. We
could.
We're up, batting 1,000 right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the problem being at the very beginning, I jumped forward, you jumped way back.
No, we got to go back. We got to look at more.
Right. So, beginning at chapter 28.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you want to keep going?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Absolutely,
all right.
I do. I was more joking.
Okay. So, the Stairway to Heaven.
Stairway to Heaven.
This is where we are.
The Led Zeppelin song.
Yeah, totally. Okay. I have questions about this too. So, this is another early morning event. This is another one of those things that, is now on my radar all the time.
Yeah.
So,
is this in detail? It keeps coming up, and it will be.
Yeah. The more you look for it, the more it's there. So, side note, prayer night, the 20th, Miguel and I signed up for
the early morning.
The early morning, because that's
no way.
That's when you meet with God.
I love that.
So
I love it.
And I learned that from this study. So verse 18, I'm just going to read a chunk and then we can kind of unpack some stuff. So this is Jacob's dream. We could even back up from there if we want. Let's go from verse 18. So early in the morning, Jacob took a stone that he had put under his head. I'm going to back up. Verse 10. Jacob left Beersheba and went towards Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put his head put it under his head and laid down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and at the top it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land in which you lie I will give to you and your offspring, west and to east, and to the north and the south. And in you your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. That's so good.
Yeah.
So immediately, rereading it with what I said earlier, you already had me convinced as far as, is this a bartering thing that happens later when he wrestles with God? Right. No. But I had kind of mixed two stories together. And as far as, is Jacob petitioning to be, well, let me be the one that the line is through. Well, in this event, this is when he promises it to him. And I don't know how I got to, well, it happens when he wrestles with God. It's probably reiterated, but
It is.
that's probably why.
Yeah, it is.
Grace for Devon. So this is where my questions start.
Okay.
This ladder or stairway to heaven, you said, I don't know when we're going to get to John. We're going to do a little bit right now.
Okay, good.
So, and I know you know all about that already. John 1, I think it's 51.
Oh, yes, I know where you're going now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he's just called, he's in the process of gathering his 12 disciples to himself. And he's met with Philip and Nathaniel, and this mysterious thing happens where we're not sure what Philip is doing under the tree.
Yeah.
But Jesus says, I saw you there. Yeah. And immediately Philip's on board, and he's like, this is the guy.
This is the guy.
And we don't know anything about what that is, but he seems to be convinced. So in verse 50, Jesus answers him and says, because I say to you, I saw you under the tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these. 51, and he said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man.
Yeah.
Explain that to me.
Yeah. So, I'll try to go as simply as possible, and then we can expound from there. What we're seeing here is that heaven is connected with earth. We were trying with Babel.
Right.
We were trying to connect earth to heaven.
Right.
But it's that heaven has to come down. It's that we can't go up. And so God is showing Jacob and us who are learning from these stories. We've already seen that in the New Testament, what Paul said in Romans chapter 4, that God is coming down from heaven to earth, and he has made a way that we can perceive.
Right.
And I do think there's something specific about the stairway.
Yeah.
Because I think it's specifically an anti-Babel image.
Right.
That God is, that it's not that you can build up to me, it's that I'm going to build down to you. Okay, so if we use that as a concept for what's happening in John chapter 1, that's what we are told about Jesus, is that not only is he the Word of God, the second person of the Trinity, not only was he with God, he is God. Not only is that the case from the beginning, he's also the tabernacle who's going to dwell with us. So we're already seeing some attachment of like typography.
Yeah.
So Jesus is the tabernacle. He's the, notice, not the temple. He's the tabernacle because he's the mobile presence of God, found in this one person, Jesus. And we get later with it's Philip or Nathaniel, whoever he's addressing there, which I think whoever was under that tree, can't remember if it was Philip or Nathaniel.
Oh, yeah. I said that wrong.
Did you? Was it? I don't remember who it was.
I think it was Philip. Let's figure that out.
Let's find out real quick.
I can't do two mistakes.
There's a lot of names. A lot of names in the Bible.
How do you know me? Before Philip called you up.
Is it Nathaniel?
Philip is there. It is Nathaniel.
It's Nathaniel. Okay, so I knew there were multiple disciples that were there, and it's only because I've been studying this lately that I would even know that. It's Nathaniel that it's there questioning. Well, we don't know what, right? You've already said that, but I think we can venture a guess that Nathaniel's probably thinking, "How can I see you? How can I know you? How can I get up to you?" It's kind of what I'm assuming Nathaniel's dealing with in his heart. Okay, and so then Jesus responds to him with the one story. That's about God coming down.
Right.
Now there's a slew of other stories.
Yeah.
Okay. But is it that Nathaniel is, dwelling on these particular passages, and Jesus happens to know that.
That's what I'm wondering too.
Yeah.
If that was fully speculative idea.
Yeah.
Is Nathaniel taking a nap under the tree, and is he thinking about like, hey, this is what Jacob did?
What Jacob did, yeah.
Maybe, but I thought that was this. I'm familiar with the concept, but it kind of hit me in a new way just now when you were explaining this stairway as an anti-Babel.
Yes.
And just the profound beauty of what it is God is doing in that. Because the original lie is you can be like God.
Bingo.
And the miracle of Christianity is that God became a man.
That's right.
And that just sets my heart on fire.
Well,
And so like what you're saying, like, well, heaven has to come down.
Yes.
Like heaven or earth, they need to be paired together.
Yes.
I'm not looking to make this heaven, but I need the king to come and reclaim
That's right.
what is his.
That's right.
And how does that happen? Do we make this place into heaven?
So
like,
good.
no. Does he return and claim it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what a miracle
Yeah.
that we have in the incarnation and the death and the resurrection and the return of a king. Oh my God.
This is why the theme of exile is going to it's going to pay off. It's going to cash out in our desire to love Jesus more and more and more, because the more that we study the Old Testament text, the more that we're going to see that Jesus maps onto those things, that all these things are actually pointing forward to Jesus. It's almost like Jesus has to come out to bless us. It's almost like he has to bring bread and wine to us, like Melchizedek. The King of Peace has to come and do that. It's almost like Jesus has to be the stairway upon which the spiritual beings have to ascend and descend and can operate within the world and influence us for good, hopefully. It's almost like he has to be the one that reaches down his hand to bring us up so that we can have a God. And that's the only way, is through this snake crusher that's going to come. And I think that's what's going on there in John chapter 1. What did you say, verse 51? Yeah, in John 1:51. And we're in this story then, in other words, is not inconsequential. It's not just a random thing. It's not just a thing you name, that camp obstacle that you jump out to, Jacob's ladder.
Sure, yeah.
No, this is, although that does have a tie, it is about trust.
Yeah.
And that's what Nathaniel responds with. I'm responding with my trust, because I now know that you are the sent one. You're the Messiah. You're this snake crusher who's promised to come, who is going to bring a bridge between heaven and earth. And I love that that's the whole, we could keep belaboring this, but that is what's going on, I think, in that story in John 1. That's what's going on here in this story. So it is that when Jacob wakes up, it's not that he's like, okay, cool, but like, you got to show me some stuff, dude.
Right.
I don't think that that's what's going on. I think that Jacob is familiar with the stories that have come before. And so now he's recognizing, if I'm going to be in a relationship with this God, that requires responsibilities.
Yeah.
So, and I think that a part of because that is what God is promising what God is promising to Abram, later Abraham, and Isaac, is that your descendants will live in this land. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, what's the final portion of Jacob's, stipulations, if you want to put it that way? That I will return home.
Yeah.
Well, if he's going to return home, he needs clothes and food.
Right.
And if God's going to make good on the promise that he's just promised to Jacob, and he's also promised to Isaac and Abraham, then it is appropriate for Jacob to call out those things that would need to be true conditions in order for the promises and covenants to be fulfilled.
So and he's also at this point like on the run.
Yeah.
From his brother. So in defining those, like you said, the request is the bare minimum.
Yes.
It is also just an assurance that, like, well, my life will be preserved through this particular,
which we're going to get there.
Yeah.
But hence the wrestling moment.
Right.
Because that happens on Jacob's way to home.
Yeah, right before he meets.
But he's going to encounter Esau on the way.
Right after.
Who's just vowed to kill him.
Yes.
So actually, I can see why someone would mix these two accounts up, because they're actually not so dissimilar from one another.
Right.
Okay.
And they are pages apart.
Pages apart.
Everyone forgive me. Okay, before we move on from there, also, he's not just seeing the angels of the Lord ascending and descending. God is there.
Yes.
And so this is Jacob's first
appearance.
Yeah, appearance of the Lord.
Mm-hmm. Which we learn from Jesus. When it says, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac, that is we learn from Jesus that he is the stairway upon which this is happening, but we also know from Scripture that this is Jesus talking.
Yeah.
That the appearance of God is in the physical, it's in a dream, but he's manifesting to Jacob in a way that he can comprehend.
So jumping again to John chapter 1, when he's talking to Nathanael and Philip, when he says something like, you will see the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man, he only refers to himself as the Son of Man. In that moment, we kind of, when we're talking about New Testament and what are the disciples thinking Jesus is trying to accomplish or whatever, in a moment like this, is this such a clear Messiah claim?
Yeah, well, it certainly is in light of the rest of the story.
But I'm saying for them, when they hear him say, like, I am the ladder between here and there, how do they receive that?
It's at least a God claim.
Okay.
How about that?
Okay.
I don't know if it's a Messiah claim.
Okay.
Well, it is, but we need to get there.
I see the distinction you're making, though.
Because this is a God claim, because we don't really. We're left with some confusion as we leave the Old Testament about how many how many persons of God are there.
Right.
Because we have a physical manifestation and we have a spiritual manifestation of God. And obviously because we're Trinitarians, we know that there are three persons in one.
Right.
Okay, we're going to affirm that just now so everyone hears that. But it's at least a God claim that Jesus is making. When it becomes a Messiah claim is because he utilizes the words Son of Man, which are a capture from the prophet Ezekiel and from the prophet Daniel, those two prophets particularly. But it's also a capture from Genesis chapter 3, because we have to be looking for one who is a son of man, son of woman, same thing, who is going to be this snake crusher. So we've got a God claim at the forefront of what Jesus is saying to Nathanael because of what happens in the story. Right, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and God of Isaac. So that's a clear claim, from this being. Yeah, but Jesus then throws salt on it. I mean, he seasons it. However you want to say it. He increases that claim by saying, I'm not just God. I'm the Messiah, or I'm not just the Messiah. I am God. However you want to view that, both are on the table there.
Yeah. Okay, so. Not to just keep jumping between these two major milestones on Jacob's life, but between this stairway moment and the wrestling moment, we have a very clear, I am the God of Abraham and Isaac declaration by God. Yeah. And then when he wrestles, this mysterious dude who shows up, he asks him his name, and he says, why do you ask me my name? Yeah. Tell me about that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways to speculate on this. I think ultimately, though, it comes down, because we got a couple details going on. It's nighttime. Okay, so the assumption is that Jacob can't, it's obscured, whoever this person is. Okay, so we don't know who this person is.
I think we forget how dark it gets when you don't have lights around.
So much light pollution.
Yeah,
where we live. But if you get out somewhere in the wilderness,
it's dark.
It gets really dark. Hence campfires. Hence bring your your flashlight. So that is the case. So we get the detail of nighttime there in that story, and we get the detail where the man, whoever this man is, it says it's almost daybreak. I'm now done. Right. Okay. Because I think this man is trying not to reveal. I think we're also finding out that this is a formational moment. So, because we do know that this is Jesus, that this is a revealing of another Christophany, that Jesus is the one wrestling with Jacob. I think Jesus is playing a little, he's setting up the conditions by which the questions and answers will occur. Right. If that makes sense. It's a formational moment. Yeah. In the same way that the test was for Abraham, so on and so forth. So it's nighttime. He doesn't want to reveal his name yet. We're going to get the reveal of God's name later on. Okay. Right now, all we have is, El Roy, Jireh, Jehovah Jireh.
So they're like descriptive names of God.
God Most High.
Right.
But we don't have his name yet. Right. And I think that he's withholding his name on purpose because he's waiting for that to be revealed in Exodus chapter 34. Interesting. Okay, so he's waiting for that. Now, we do have now that gets a little bit muddied because we do know about God's name earlier in the chapter and those kinds of, not in this chapter, but earlier in Genesis. and later on, there's some mention of his name. So that's not a perfect equation, what I'm saying right now. So it kind of messes with my answer a little bit, but not completely, because the narrative is such that we don't know God's name until he self declares it in Exodus 34 with Moses. So I think God's playing a little bit coy here in this moment on purpose, but he's also setting up the condition by which Jacob will then ask for the thing that they're wrestling about, which is that Jacob's now realizing who this guy is.
Right.
And so as the day's breaking, he's realizing who this man is, and is then realizing, because like at the end of a wrestling match, what you don't do generally is say, "Will you bless me?"
You do if you're doing it right.
Yeah, right. At the end of a wrestling match, there might still be bad blood between you and the individual, or whatever. You guys know what wrestling looks like. So I think it's in the same way that the sun is dawning. It's dawning on Jacob's recognition,
Right.
that this guy is someone I've encountered before.
Right.
And I think that's what we're seeing as a result of this story, where we have the first appearance, now we have the second appearance.
Got it.
It's just that it's an interesting kind of appearance.
Right.
Because Jacob doesn't start the fight.
Yeah, what is going on? Can you imagine you're in the dark and some dude jumps on you? It's a wild story.
It is a wild story. But again, it's formational.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
Jacob needs to see this.
Yeah.
Now, and I'll say this in the sermon, I don't think Jacob's a weak dude. Just because I called him
an apron string
mama's boy. That was probably a little too much. That might have been a little too much on my part.
I thought about tagging that. I was like, minute 15, 30 or whatever really hit me. Apron
that
string
moment.
mama's boy.
String mama's boy.
You might see that guy in eternity.
I know. I need to chill out.
You might have to wrestle.
To wrestling beat me up. I don't think he's someone to be messed with, because in the story we find out, and it's not a detail I really had time to go into, but when he gets to Haran, however you say it, he himself moves the wellstone.
Yeah.
So I think, that's only one little tiny detail. We can't maybe rest everything on that. Maybe he just kind of, ooched it.
This is the kind of thing that makes me wonder, how big's a wellstone?
It's not small.
Is it like a manhole cover?
I think we're at least talking about a stone this large.
Okay.
But again, it's not a little tiny piece of shale, because it would get busted.
Yeah.
Right? And this is millstone country.
Yeah.
This is millstone time.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's a millstone, but it's probably a thick piece of stone that's covering up and is heavy enough that it keeps predators out, keeps random people from coming in just anytime they want, lifting the stone off. So it's a security device.
Detail. Yeah.
So it's interesting that he's able to go, So anyway, I think Jacob's probably not a dude to be messed with.
Yeah.
Physically speaking.
That's fair. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's, I'm speculating there.
I wouldn't have picked up on that, but I'm glad that you had mentioned it, because I was like, huh.
So I think there is a formational thing here.
Okay.
Jacob's physical strength and spiritual strength need to be tested.
Right.
And, Jesus, we keep saying Jesus, the man who is, we think a Christophany, well, we know a Christophany, actually, because of later on Hosea identifies him, the prophet Hosea. But anyway, and who else gives blessings but God?
Right.
Okay. So anyway, man, there's a lot of detail in there already. But yeah, I think Jacob has to see that he needs to be yielded.
Okay.
He has to be yielded to this man.
Okay. Jumping back and forth.
I don't even know if I answered.
No, you totally did. Yeah,
your questions.
The question was the first encounter in the dream. He makes a declaration of who he is.
Right.
And then in the wrestling match, he says, "Why do you ask who I am?"
Right.
And it is he's making it clear to him who he is.
Yes.
So jumping back to chapter 28, back and forth. Jacob takes the stone that he's rested his head on, and he sets it upright. He anoints it with oil. Yep. He names the place Bethel. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And I was just reading, poking around, and that there's these formational things that happen with Jacob, and as he is promising that you will be my God. In the notes in my Bible, I thought that this was just super interesting. It was saying that setting up a pillar is a great way to recognize a significant place or significant event or whatever.
Right.
And I was wondering, is that kind of like, other figures in the Bible set up an Ebenezer.
Yes.
Is kind of what I'm assuming we're dealing with. But this is a place that Jacob returns to later, and he's through this formation thing and saying, like, you will be my God.
Yeah.
When he does return to this place, he tells the men who are with him to get rid of your idols and your other gods, and then they set up an altar to the Lord at this place.
At this place.
So this is one of the moments where it's like, you want to mark where this stone is put up and anointed with oil. This is a location moment in your Bible.
And, okay, so interestingly enough, and I need a little help to search this out. Okay. But later significance is this. So let's get back to what you're talking about, but I'm going to just throw out a couple things that also happen here. This is later on in the book of Judges, where the Ark of the Covenant resides, is in Bethel.
Whoa.
Okay, the house of God, okay? Then, though, when the kingdom split, which I know we're going way ahead here, but when the kingdom of Israel splits, and it's the north and the south, the northern kingdom sets this up as the place of idol worship.
Do they?
Yes, in Bethel. And it becomes a place of prophetic condemnation. It's also the place in which Josiah's reforms take the most significant hold. Okay? Anyway, yes, it's one of those important points. Now, what becomes interesting is that God shifts the place where Jacob calls it the house of God. That's what Bethel means. God shifts from that location to the place that he will call his house of worship. Which will be in Jerusalem.
Right.
The place where the King of Peace, anyway.
Right.
And all
and
that.
Then we're back.
and then we're full circle around, yeah. And I think that's really fascinating. So Jacob names a place for God, asks for God's name, which he doesn't give him, and instead God names him. So there's some really interesting...
That's good.
There's some really interesting back and forth going on
here.
here.
I like that. Okay, I just wanted to point out, mark this place.
Oh, it's really important.
This is a spot.
It's really important. And it's important for Jacob's story particularly, like you brought up the idea of he comes back and says, get rid of all your idols, all that stuff. That's when we see finally, Jacob is truly, truly walking with God at that point. And I can't remember what chapter that is. You were just there,
I want to say it was that he returns.
Yeah.
I think it's 35.
35.
Yep.
And then after that moment, Jacob's story is not completely, but essentially done as far as the way the narrative focuses in.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Because after his formation's finished. So then after that, it shifts now on to Joseph, whom you're going to preach about in a couple weeks.
That's very interesting that we kind of see Jacob navigating and doing a lot of things by his own will and choices. And then when he encounters God and his promises, and then we end cap it with returning to that place.
That's right.
The Bible, man.
It's so good.
So good. So good. All right.
So good. But there's still a lot to cover here. And we're still going. It's good.
29.
29. I'm there.
Okay. What a mess. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, it's really dysfunctional.
Yeah.
It's really, really dysfunctional.
You want to give a summary?
Yeah, so we've got Jacob hanging out with Laban. We've already encountered Laban one time, and he's already kind of been a little bit shady,
right,
in his dealings, and we don't know why, but that just kind of is the case. That was the case with the servant who was going to get Rebekah,
right?
Okay, because Rebekah is Laban's sister, okay, married to Isaac. So Jacob shows up, spends a month there. We get kind of a little detail in the same way that the servant saw Rebekah and that was the wife for Isaac. Jacob sees Rachel.
It's a similar
situation. I think those are mapped on each other on purpose. So then Jacob goes and stays with Laban. Now he's there on purpose because he's run away from all of his relationships, everything that's been burnt down as a result of his actions and his mother's actions. So he's there now. And after he's there about a month, Laban sets up a business arrangement. Why should you work for me for nothing?
Right.
Let's be partners, essentially. Okay, name your wages. So his wages are, I want to marry your younger daughter, Rachel. Okay, and Laban's like, bingo. 7 years go by, feels like nothing to Jacob. Wonderful. Oh, so sweet, wonderful. Jacob. Felt like nothing 7 years. But then...
Yeah, it says that, doesn't it?
It says exactly that. Setting us up.
Okay, this is so exactly what we did with Abraham.
Yes.
And
yes.
like he says something. What does he say?
Yeah, my wife is so beautiful, or something like
Yeah,
that.
and he's really laying it on thick. And then
Yeah. So say you're my sister.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's
All right.
it's exactly written
Yeah.
that way. So yeah, so he wants to be with Rachel. He barely spends any time. If the 7 years, barely any time. And then what happens is he gets. We assume, we don't
Right.
know. We assume that he gets so partied up, probably drinking wine. We know from the context, it's probably a week long of partying, and there's no assumption. There should be no assumption on our part that Jacob has any indication that Rachel will not be his wife. That's the deal. That's been the business arrangement. That's been exactly what he's expecting.
And his response afterwards is
Yes.
our indicator
That
he
he's
is
completely shocked.
Yeah.
What happens
How?
is
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
that's the
I'm
kind
following you.
of that's
Yeah.
kind of what makes this whole story great. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's that Laban, instead of offering Rachel when we're kind of at the height of the festival, the marriage party situation, Jacob seems to be either so drunk or whatever, so euphoric, it's so dark outside, who knows what. Okay, she's wearing a veil, whatever. Leah is the one who is given to Jacob in marriage. And then when Jacob wakes up, he realizes it's not Rachel, that it was Leah, that he consummated a marriage with.
Right.
And he's like enraged, because he was working for Rachel. He wanted to be married to Rachel, and
Right.
at this moment he's not. There's no indication that he will be married to Rachel. So Laban changes the business arrangement, like under his feet, which we'll find out later is a part of the reason that they want to return home. And I don't think it's just this moment. I think that this is character that we're seeing about Laban. So Laban's going to consistently say, well, yeah,
Right.
this, and then he changes it.
Right.
So anyway, then we find out that Rachel will be given into marriage as long as Laban can secure another 7-year agreement for Jacob to work with Laban. And we find out why. Because Jacob is such a good manager. The flocks increase as a result of what Jacob does.
Yeah, he's another person in this lineage that we can see the effect of, oh, surely God is with you in everything that you do.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
and people wanting to attach themselves to that.
And you just said what Laban said, but Laban didn't say it the same way.
How does he say
He said, I found out by divination.
Yeah, okay, I was going to ask you about that.
Which is kind of a striking thing.
There's so much that's going on
Oh my
in this
gosh.
story that just as a Christian and the things that are comfortable and familiar and easy to gloss over, where I'm like, oh man, this crazy scenario of getting paired up with the wrong sister and blah, 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 what a mess, all that I can digest. Laban is doing things through divination, have no idea what that looks
A little
like.
strange.
And then we get into the flocks and the patterns of the animals, and there's
And somehow a stick on the ground in front of the water changes.
that.
Yeah, there's something really odd going on here. Okay, so again, this is a supernatural document. Let's not, And again, I'm glad that you called out like our Western modern, viewpoint of things. We're generally materialists, unless Jesus decides to save us, and we come into, we come into being in Christ. And so we don't often have, at least by default, a spiritual worldview attached to our thinking. So what's happening here is clearly showing us that divination does work. Okay? It's just the question of who we're communicating with.
Right.
So so in other words, when we get these laws later on about no divination, no witchcraft, those kinds of things, it's not because they're fake and it's a waste of time for God's people.
Right.
It's because they're real and they're dangerous.
Yeah.
Because God cares about who we're communicating with.
Right.
And we've already seen in Genesis chapter 6 that there are, and Genesis 3, that there are, we'll say angelic, but again, spiritual beings. There are spiritual beings who are opposed to God.
Yeah.
And we can communicate with them if we open ourselves up to that communication. And they will communicate back. There's this crazy story later on in 2 Samuel about the witch of Endor and how she's able, by some means of divination or necromancy, is able to call up Samuel, the prophet. And Samuel is aware of what's going on, such that he's able to give judgment to King Saul.
Yeah.
So-
and doesn't he tell him, like, you ought not to have done this?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I heard it put very, very well when it comes to divination or witchcraft or whatever, that for the Christian, it is don't touch those things, not because you shouldn't use them, but because they will use you.
Period.
And I was like, oh, that's such a good way to frame that.
And again, in our modern materialist, hyper rational worldview that we possess, we think we're in control. We think we're like Cartesian brains, which is a form of it's a camp of philosophy. But the idea is that we're walking brains, and that we make decisions based upon our hyper rationality. It's not the case. We make decisions because we're hungry. We make decisions because we're tired. We make decisions because we felt like it.
Right.
We don't often, and generally, what we'll do is we'll attach the rationality after the fact.
Yeah. Or look back and be like, I was not being rational because I was hungry. Yeah, I know this because I'm a parent.
And the Snickers commercials know this, know? It's like you're not yourself when you're hungry,
Right.
So like we're not actually as hyper rational as we like to think we are.
Right.
In fact, we're far more led by emotion and influences. That's why marketing works.
Yeah.
Why is it that Apple was such a successful, company? Because their marketing was so good in the early thousands.
Yeah.
And we could keep going on and on and on about that. That's how people manipulate one another, is through propaganda and marketing. Okay, because we are swayed by our emotions just as much as we're swayed by our rationality.
Right.
So to believe that we cannot be influenced by another voice is actually a little bit of hubris.
Right.
And that comes, I would say that's hubris that's built into our Western modernist ideas. And so we really do have to pay attention to what the Bible's showing for us here, is that there is a supernatural realm. Even if you can't see it or don't know how to access it right now, it doesn't mean you could not find out and actually access who knows who.
Right.
And it's not that again, it's not that this is fake and God doesn't want us to mess around with fake stuff. It's that it's real and that he wants to control the communication. Because he wants the communication to be between him and us.
That's where I was headed.
Not between us and them.
Yes.
Whoever them might be.
Right.
And we actually will learn this, later on in the story. I've already, actually, in the sermon series, I've already talked about this sons of God idea.
Yeah.
And these sons of God are going to be judged, according to Psalm 89, and 82, and 91, because they misled the nations that they were over. They misled the people to worship another god.
Laban's using divination to see why is Jacob so prosperous in what he puts his hands to. And I think that there is, I think you point this out, he has some sort of like managing skill to him, obviously, but also it is apparent that the Lord is blessing him in what he does. And it doesn't even seem, Laban is looking for ways to attach himself to that for as long as he can. So the after effect, or I guess the response to Jacob finding himself united to Leah when he wants to be married to Rachel, is either the prospect of being married to Rachel is now off the table, or according to Laban, work for me for another 7, which is horrendous in its own way.
This is the issue with hard patriarchy, and we've talked about this in our sermon series. So this isn't like a taboo topic for us to talk through. But yeah, because I don't really think that hard patriarchy is the way that God sets things up to be. I think you could make the case that male headship, those kinds of things. Okay, we're not even trying to get into that thing. But here's the issue with hard patriarchy, is that women and children suffer as a result of men trying to stay in charge, be in charge, or take charge.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't think it's the way that God set it up to be, right? That they're supposed to be partners with one another.
Yeah, I agree. And not just that how did you just phrase it, that women and children are the ones that will suffer. They can, but if they are used, then they will be.
Then they will, period.
And that is the problem. So however you want to parse out, headship and leadership and value and roles and all that stuff. If a person is used as an asset, which is what we're seeing in this, then that's where
I 100%. That's where we're seeing an issue like this with Leah, where essentially her body is being used in order to garner another deal with Jacob.
Yeah.
Because like that is, and guaranteed they know Jacob is trying to get back home.
Right.
Like that's a part of his whole deal. Guaranteed they know about, the story of the stairway, and they know all this stuff. So it's clear that, to me at least, that Laban, I think, again, I'm making an assumption, but I think it's a pretty clear assumption, that Laban is trying to use his daughter's body in order to gain further financial benefit for himself.
Right.
And like I said, when because that would be how I would define hard patriarchy, would be the use of people.
Right.
It's the kind of leadership where I'm subjugating, where we're communicating with one another, and maybe
it's not partnership.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. It's not partnership the way that maybe a soft patriarchy or a mutualist position would sit. It's further along in the spectrum, and it's.
And would you even say that even within soft patriarchy or a mutual partnership kind of thing, there is still leadership within stuff like that?
Sure, there is. And however, and again, however that works. So for the soft patriarchy, that would be it's male headship, but again, it is more of a partnership role.
Right.
Mutualist, it would be that we're both working together. Either way, those I think is what the Bible. Those are the two main viewpoints that I think we could draw from the scriptures.
As far as what we ought to emulate.
Correct. Yeah, this we're not supposed to emulate.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah.
And it doesn't just end with, okay, well now we love Leah and everything's okay, and I also love Rachel, and woe, benefit for me.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite. And that was, in reading over it this week, that was one of the things that just kind of kept punching me over and over again. And I think it should. Like, no one should go into this story and think that any of this is okay.
Right.
But I was really trying to think about, I'd asked you about this before. We referenced it today, that the younger taking the position of the eldest. And Laban says, it's not our custom to marry the younger before the older. You have to marry the oldest one first. Now, let's take a second and put ourselves in Leah's position. The way that she's even described within the text is not...
It's not great.
It's not great. We say she has weak eyes or something like that. And Rachel is lovely
beautiful
in form or whatever, depending on what translation you're reading. And it's like, okay... We shouldn't put two sisters next to together and decide which one's the pretty one.
Yeah,
which one's more valuable.
Exactly.
And all of that obviously is ridiculous. Yes. What I wanted us to do, or what I found myself doing, is thinking about like, okay, Leah is not just an asset.
Right.
This is a person.
It's a person.
And I don't feel like I have to beat this drum too hard or anything. But there's an effect that would happen to Leah's character. As long as we're talking about formation and all this stuff, that could be very positive, but then also in a negative sense. If her story is one that is bookended between being used by her father for his monetary gain, she's an asset, and then on the other end, we see her living an entire life within a marriage where it's clear, even after she has children with him and all that stuff, that Jacob's affections and his desire and his efforts are going to Rachel. Yeah. And this is the world that she lives in. Right. And it even gets to a point where, Rachel, I think it's in verse 31.
That chapter 29? Of
29, that Rachel is barren. But Leah conceives and bears a son. And time passes and she bears children to Jacob, multiple children. And where does she say it? Verse 34, again she conceived and bore a son and said, now this time my husband will be attached to me because I have borne him 3 sons. And
there's this longing.
Yeah. But that's not how it pans out. No. And it's like, okay, let's not just look at Laban's misconduct and say this is a tragedy and, Jacob's in a weird position and he shouldn't have multiple wives anyways. Yeah. The people within this story, this is doing something to them as well. And it should unsettle us in every level,
I agree. I agree. And there again is some of the tension of the story that I just don't know that we resolve necessarily. It's just a part of the reality of sin.
Yeah.
And because sin is the way that it is, it's never just your sin. It's never just, it never just impacts you solely.
Yeah.
And you can make a case, maybe physical sin from the New Testament, what Paul says about, physical sin being a sin against your body, those kinds of things. But again, like, it will result somewhere else. And that's the nature of what we're seeing in this story as well, is that, yes, sin has shrapnel attached.
Yeah.
And Jacob gets it, and Leah gets it, and Rachel gets it. Everybody's getting the result of this dysfunctional relationship that Laban has set up.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said, the way that you said it, I don't know that it is a tension that we resolve.
Yeah.
We don't.
Right.
And neither do they, but
Right.
they try to.
Yes.
And it is so familiar to the misstepped conduct
Right.
of the previous generation.
Absolutely.
So getting into chapter 30, verse 1, when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister. She said to Jacob, "Give me children or I shall die."
Yeah.
And this arises anger and dissension between the two of them. And Jacob says, "Am I God that, I give you children or close up your womb," or all this stuff. And how do they seek to resolve the problem? She says, this is verse 3, "Here is my servant Bilhah. Go into her so that she may give birth on my behalf, that I may have children through her." This is almost exactly what we hear
with
Sarai say with Hagar.
That's right.
And it's like, okay, we're running the same sins, the same scheming again and again and again.
That's right.
And, it, in one sense, is kind of like, guys, what are we doing? You know your own family story. You have reason to believe that God will do what he has promised.
Yes.
And still.
And still.
And I guess I was going to say, to be fair to them. I'm not trying to say to be fair to them. I'm saying when I look at myself, this is the same problem that I have when I choose my way and my sin desires versus God's promise. This is showing us, their misstep is showing us something about ourselves in this story.
100%. It's showing, now maybe it's not in the same cultural value set and same context, but principally it is showing us that the heart is deceitful above all things.
Yeah.
It's wicked, and we keep trying to get our own way on our own terms. We keep trying to get good as we would define it, and it ends up with heartbreak. If they had done what Isaac and Rebekah had done, if they had, because Rebekah was barren too.
Yeah.
If they had gone and prayed and beseeched, the Lord for his intervention, then who knows what would have happened.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, this is what we're left with. Now, we should make a distinction between the way that Leah and Rachel and Bilhah and later Zilpah. Jacob's got 4 women at some point because there's this jockeying for position. So what's fascinating is, instead of it being sons, because there are 2 sons against one another, Esau and Jacob.
Yeah.
There's also now 2 daughters against one another.
Yeah.
And those daughters they're increasing their sin by their choices as well.
Yeah.
By drawing in Bilhah, by drawing in Zilpah. So what's fascinating is that when there's discord and dysfunction like this, and we're not walking with the Lord, things they begin to ripple out, or I don't know how to magnify as they go, or something like that.
Yeah.
Shrapnel.
Yeah.
It's this idea that your sin is not just your sin.
Yeah.
It keeps going, and we have to, like Cain and Abel, if you do what is right, won't you be blessed?
Yeah.
And I think that promise of God to Cain, it's like, if you do what is right, won't you be blessed? What if they would just do what is right? Wouldn't God will meet you with blessing when you're walking. It's not a perfect formula. We got Job in the story, and all kinds of stuff. But even the Proverbs give us kind of this axiomatic idea. It's like, if I walk with the Lord, then I'll prosper.
Yeah.
That's not a perfect equation.
But these are the effects of living with wisdom.
That's right.
Yeah.
There are cause and effects of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reality is, who knows how God would have blessed them if they had attached themselves to him. What we learn later is that Rachel worships her father's gods. Because later when they're fleeing, she scoops up her father's gods
Right.
from the house
Yeah.
that she has to go then hide on
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
When he comes chasing after Jacob, which he's using as a pretense to bring him back or bring him justice or whatever.
Yep.
But the point being that, like, clearly there's not like a walk in step with the Lord, and maybe Jacob's doing that, or we don't know.
Well,
It's kind of quiet on that.
I don't know that he is, though,
Yeah.
because, I mean,
Yeah.
how much resistance does he give?
Yeah, none at all.
Yeah. So, and well, this is one of the things that I was kind of tracking with as we're working our way through this together is generationally, we're kind of doing this back and forth dance as far as with an individual
right,
where they're like,
right.
hey, they're scheming and in opposition to all this stuff and trying to do the self-preservation thing. And then God interacts with them, gives them a promise, and then they seem to get it right. And then the following generation seems, for Abraham, for instance.
Right.
And then Isaac, well, his stories is a lot shorter. We
Yeah.
don't get as much detail. He's not a perfect man.
No, he gets
but it
it
seems
wrong.
like he makes a deliberate
Yes.
effort to walk upright and with God more than Abraham did. Then we get to Jacob, and he lives up to his name as the
heel grabber, the
all that
deceiver, all
stuff.
the things. Yep.
And then as we we'll get there, but once we get to Joseph,
Yeah.
Joseph is, he's the opposite end again.
Yes.
Where this is someone who is pointedly, and
Yes.
what is he trying to do? And is this a response to the fallout of growing up in a place or coming from a family that looks like, well, I can see that didn't work,
Yeah.
so I'm going to lean into this.
Right.
I wonder if there's something to that. It's kind of something that I'm tracking as
Yeah.
we go through.
I would be interested to see how the pattern, how in patterned that pattern may be or not be. It's fascinating to think through. I mean, it is the case, and we talked about this past Sunday, that there is kind of a cycle, whether or not that's generational per se. Maybe we couldn't chart it from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next.
It certainly
to the
happens
next, to the next.
within the individual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So-
there is a pattern nonetheless, whether that is expressly one A, B, A, B, A, B.
Yeah.
It might be A, B, C, A, B.
Right.
Whatever. The point is that there is a pattern, and the pattern is forget God, walk away from him,
Yeah.
cry out to help when we're in trouble. He returns. He returns us to him, and then now we're with him for the time that we're with him.
Yeah.
And then repeat the cycle.
Yeah.
And that seems to be what's already being set up, which we'll really see a statement of that when we get to Judges and into First and Second Chronicles. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough situation. What's going on here? There's a lot of dysfunction, a lot of issues. In fact, there's even bartering. So they use Laban uses Leah's body. Rachel uses Bilhah's body. Leah uses Zilpah's body. Rachel uses Leah's body. There's a bargaining about mandrakes.
Right. Yeah.
That some root that some like literal root you can pull out of the ground. There's some bargaining over these mandrakes.
Yeah.
And Rachel's or Leah's like, yeah, fine, you can or whichever way it is, you can be with him tonight.
Yeah.
There's a lot of dysfunction going on here.
So this is one of the things that was kind of standing out to me as we get through this is Abraham is given the original promise, right? And we're waiting for things to get better.
Yep.
Are they?
Such a good question.
I mean, we're getting closer to, and we're seeing people who, when they do it right, like we said, when they are walking with the Lord, we see people who are embodying what it would be to be a image bearer of God and what he has designed and how to be a blessing to all nations. We are seeing that happen, but it kind of seems like generation to generation, the stakes are higher, the collateral damage is higher, the conflict is higher, and there's just more people in play. And you mentioned this earlier, that we're going from an individual to a family that will become a nation.
Right.
And it's interesting to me that we're a long way off from the incarnation or anything like that.
That's right.
But the closer we get to that, it does seem like the human problem isn't getting resolved yet. And that's very interesting to me, that no matter how many promises and blessings that God is bringing to his covenant family, it's not enough. And again, this is a moment where I'm reflecting this at myself.
That's right.
For as faithful as God has been, has it put sin to bed entirely for me?
No.
I hope I'm getting better.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
But then we read words like what Paul says in Romans chapter 7.
Yeah.
Wretched man that I am.
Yeah.
Right? Like the things I don't want to do, I do. The things I do want to do, I don't
Yeah.
do. It's like there is this battle between flesh and spirit. And oftentimes our most immediate desires outweigh our deepest desires. That is often again, we're back to this idea of the Cartesian brain and all these ideas we're talking about. We're not hyper-rationalistic like we think we are. We're also not as hyper-spiritual as we might think we are.
I feel like we're fueled by appetite.
Yes.
Yes. And I think that can include the spiritual side of things.
I agree.
So
I agree. And I even think that, this is pinging on my brain as you're saying appetite. Like that's even the way that like sin is described, as this animal that wants to have you. Like,
and what is the opposite? That we're given spiritual practices that put us into discipline like fasting.
That's right.
And it's like, okay, I'm registering this as we talk. Like, I'm seeing the direct assault from the enemy on my weakness.
Yes.
And I'm seeing the remedy that God presents
that
involves my self-denial and the subjugation of my desires for His, for the sake of clarity and making it to where God would have me go.
And I think you said something too that's also pinging on my brain. It's like you would hope that this story would be going like this, as far as like morality goes. These choices that these people are making, and we're being blessed by God. And so won't things be getting? I think the story it's like dispense with that graph altogether, because like we can't. There is no way to define how sinful sin is.
Right.
All throughout the story. That's how bad it is.
What I was thinking is, if we were doing this by our conduct, that is another attempt at the tower. I like that.
That's right.
And it's not how it works.
That's not how it works.
Like we said earlier, it takes God coming down.
That's right. Because our sinfulness is so much worse than we assume it to be. And they might think, okay, well, this is just how families operate. But like even in now, we could say that because Christ has come, particular, Paul says it this way, elemental spiritual forces. So there's a reason like, almost globally, polygamy is no longer a practice that is looked upon with any favor. That would be like an instance where Jesus has put to shame some of these again elements of the world, or as a result of the lift that has occurred as a result of Christianity going abroad. There has been a lift morally speaking in some ways, and so maybe we could say things have gotten better in some sense. But the point of Jesus is not that your culture got better, therefore you're a better person, therefore you're more moral, therefore you're more righteous. The point of Jesus is that all of us are sinful. All of us are wicked in our innermost. And we need a heart transplant. we need a new spirit inside of us. And so even if maybe your morality has increased and maybe you have a better cultural form than a different cultural form, it doesn't make you righteous before God. That is the case. And actually, that's going to be a major theme as we go through exile. Because as we go to the prophets, and even in Moses, we're going to find that to be a theme all the way throughout. Now, we could belabor this point, I think, for a long, long time, but I think we should look at the 12 sons. I know we get the 12th later on. Okay. But we do have the 12 sons, and we might as well call them out because they're important. We have Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. That's all the first four of Jacob and Leah. Now, I do find it interesting that Leah is the firstborn, not looked on favor, but has the fourthborn that becomes the promised one. There's some interesting something all throughout there. Okay. Go ahead.
I do have a question about this. So far in the story, the kind of one of the themes that we've been plugging along through is this son of promise. And we know ultimately we're talking about Jesus. But so far there has been a man and his wife and a promise that they will have a child and all the scheming that goes along with that until God makes it happen. If we were charting on that, if that was our line that we were following, if I was going to guess, if I wasn't, already familiar with the word, and I was like, what line does Jesus come through or whatever, I would have thought it was Joseph.
The last one. Yes.
Jacob and Rachel.
Yes. Yep.
But it's not.
Why? Well, again, these categories are being messed with, and it's
not a hard, fast
There you go.
God is definitely using...
The rule is not every second born is now the blessed born, or every last born is the blessed, or something like that. Now, we will find that Benjamin, who actually is the final blessed, or born, is blessed in some way, and Joseph is blessed in some way. But now we're starting to see even those categories that we've already been set up to see about the second born or later born being blessed, being subverted, because it's not about a rule that God is putting in place.
Right.
It's about his will and who he's going to work with in order to, who's going to choose in order to see the Messiah come.
So I know this is jumping way ahead, and I'm just going to show my hand and say that, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Why is Judah's line significant? Is there a reason? Is there some sort of covenant that happens or that is given to Judah? Or is this just where we land?
I think it's just where we land.
Really?
Yes, I think it's just where we land.
Okay.
We do get some detail about his name and his blessing that occurs later on when Jacob blesses all of the sons, when they finally all end up back in Egypt. I know we're going ahead in the story here. And there is some prophetic word spoken over him by Jacob. Okay, so that is important. But it is that we're seeing already some flashes of his story before anybody else's, even before we get to those particular blessing prophecy kind of things that go on.
So I guess even separate from receiving a particular blessing, because he does bless all his sons.
Yes.
So Judah's going to get one. Is it a particular blessing? Or even further than that, I think the thing that I would find more compelling isn't just that, the patriarchs have not just received a blessing, but they've also had an encounter with the Lord.
Yes.
Does Judah have one of those?
Not that we're aware of.
Okay.
Not that we're aware of.
Okay.
We only have that, like I was charting on here, which is that Judah, because again, you would assume it would be Joseph or Benjamin, or Joseph's sons, who both become kind of the dual tribe of Joseph. Okay, Ephraim and Manasseh. You might assume, okay, well, Joseph's the kind of the main point of the story later on. He's the one that the snake crusher is going to come through. He
accomplishes something very particular at a very particular time, and does it just kind of say like, hey, Joseph closes out this section.
We're
all over the place right now.
Well, that's okay though, because it's pertinent.
Yeah.
Because the next chapter we're going to go into is about these 12 sons.
Yeah.
And the nation that comes as a result of them.
Yeah.
As we go into looking into Egypt. So this is important. The only thing that we get, particularly Jacob blessing his sons in Genesis 49, is Judah, your brothers will praise you, and your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion he crouches and lies down like a lioness. Who dares to rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. And that's it. And the next is Zebulun.
That's it?
And then we go to Zebulun.
What a weird thing.
Yeah, but it's like,
I was getting goosebumps when you were reading it. I was like, what is happening?
So I think, whether God chooses or prompts Jacob, to give this particular kind of prophetic blessing. Because none of the other sons get it like this.
Okay, and there's the lion imagery or the kingship of all the language
scepter,
is
under your feet again.
Is incredible.
Yes.
The one that kind of struck me as different is that your brothers will bow down to you.
Yes, which is Joseph's promise.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to point out is no, we don't have a direct appearance the way that we have with the other patriarchs.
So let me put those up against each other. When Joseph is told that his brothers will bow down to him through these subsequent dreams that he has, that does come to pass.
Yes.
But it's not promised to his descendants.
Correct.
Judah's is about his line. So that's probably the distinction. Even though they are mirroring each other, they are not the same.
And I'm trying to see if we get any mention of Judah's name in here. I'd have to find the particular passage where Judah comes from. Let me see here. So Judah's name is I will praise the Lord. And so that's about as significant as we get as far as who he is. And then we actually get kind of a nasty story about him later on.
Yeah.
So it's not that God has appeared directly to him. I think that once we get to kind of the national step, because that's kind of where we are right now.
Right.
You know, we've gone from the individuals,
Yes.
the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, on into now the nation.
Right. We've gone from individual to family to nation.
And now we've broadened it out. And so now the way that God is going to relate with them will shift a little bit, not completely. It's still going to be that he appoints someone.
Right.
And works with that someone for the good of the nation.
You like an intercessor on
Like
the
an
part of the people?
like a mediator, with God's presence to the people. Absolutely, absolutely. So it's going to be that way, but we're not getting maybe a direct appearance in the same way we are expecting to see it.
Okay.
As a result of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Because the audience has changed.
Correct.
It's broader.
It's much broader.
Okay.
Now we will still get appearances.
Yeah.
Samson's parents, who you brought him up,
Yeah.
are going to have the angel of the Lord appear to them. So
I forgot about that.
it's just for instance, and it shows up with Joshua.
Yeah.
I mean, so anyway, there's all these appearances that I don't think people are keen to see, or they're seeing it in the sense of a vision or a voice from heaven.
Yeah.
As opposed to the Christophany thing that we're already charting right now.
Right.
So as we go through the story, I'll probably make mention of several of those again because I'm trying to point to Jesus' eternality.
Yeah.
You know, his divine identity.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which is really important. But
super important.
But first four. That's what we've got so far. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, who's also a very important figure because that's the priestly line, who's not also the firstborn. There's all this stuff's going on in the text, and maybe there are particular things, but for our broad theme of exile, we won't maybe hone in too heavy on each of the particular things of each one of these. But either way, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, who was born of Bilhah, Naphtali, who was also born of Bilhah, Gad, who is now we've got like these, four sons here who are, kind of the contentious, well, if you're a servant, then my servant, okay. Yeah. Then we've got Gad and Asher, who are both Zilpah. Then we have Issachar, who's Leah, Zebulun, who is Leah. Then we have Joseph and Benjamin, who are both actually Rachel's kids.
Yeah.
And she actually passes away in giving birth to Benjamin because the laboring is too hard. Mm-hmm. And so these are now going to be the 12 tribes that will become the nation of Israel. But first, we've got to get to a national place, and that's where you're going to talk about.
Right.
And I know we're a little ahead here, but that's okay.
I think, it's appropriate to just say, like, hey, we're working our way through another list of a genealogy and who has what sons and whatever, and don't just read past it. Yeah. Plant a flag in it because you're going to jump back for sure.
These are important. And again, because that is God's way of defeating the serpent, of defeating this problem of man and woman's disobedience in the garden. It's going to be to bring the snake crusher about, who's going to come from humanity. And so the genealogies are important because we need to be looking for, who is the snake crusher coming through? And it's a little obfuscated here. It's a little harder to discern.
Right.
We'll learn later on, like with the promise of Jacob, the blessing there, and then we'll learn later in the story as we go. But anyway, these are the 12 sons that come as a result of these four people that Jacob are married to. So I want to point this out. We talked about how difficult and dysfunctional and bad their situation has been. We should distinguish that from the children. The children are themselves a blessing. No matter how a kid comes about, they're awesome.
Right.
And I know that you're not saying anything different than that.
I got you.
But it is important for us just to say, because we have a bad situation that a kid's coming into,
yes,
or as a result of a kid coming about, doesn't mean that the kid's bad.
Yeah. The means of a person becoming a person does not diminish their value.
Absolutely. And that is a uniquely Christian perspective, by the way.
And a vital one.
Because we have so much Because the Bible's not trying to vindicate or validate or valorize
anybody up.
No. Everyone is sinful.
Yeah.
But it is worth just saying out loud. For sure. Just because they're where they come from is a dysfunctional situation doesn't mean that these kids, these individual image bearers, aren't valued and loved by God, particularly.
And they will make their very own trouble.
Oh my. Oh my. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, where are we? 31?
I think 31.
Okay.
Well, hold on. No, pause. We're still in 30 because what happens next after all the kids are born is that Jacob's ready to go home.
Yeah.
Okay. So, not all the kids. 11 kids are born, and then they're ready to go home. because I think Jacob has now fulfilled his 14 years of service to Laban. He's ready to go back. God has promised I'm going to inherit this land. I'm not just staying here because I'm getting rich. I have somewhere I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be in the land that my descendants are going to have. I have descendants now. I've been blessed by God. So now I need to. Now it's time to go back. God did all the ifs. I've had clothes.
Right.
I've had food, and not even that. I've also gotten wives, children, and blessing.
Yeah.
And now I want to go back to the land that I'm supposed to be in. Okay, so he tells Laban that, he starts to tell. He starts to tell Laban, and Laban's like, no, please don't. We know that you've been blessed by God, and all that stuff. So they cut another arrangement.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's where that whole speckled.
A strange one.
It's so weird with the speckled sheep, and Jacob calls out. He says to Laban, "I'll take the lesser valuable sheep. I'll take the speckled and the spotted and the striped or whatever. Okay, you take the single colored ones, the white ones, the black ones, whatever." Essentially what happens is he hashes a scheme where when they're mating with one another, he puts like this stick in front of them so that they will be a speckled color or a spotted color or a whatever color.
Which, let me ask questions about this. Okay. So, as strange as that already is, I'm going to ask questions.
Yeah.
This, we already talked about, divination and stuff like that are things that we ought not do.
Right.
And all those reasons. This is something that happens is really, really strange.
Yeah.
But it's also not something that he's told to do.
No. I think it's.
So
is it divination or is it some kind of God's?
Is he dipping his hand into?
It doesn't say so, and so I have a hard time just completely saying yes to that answer. I have a hard time completely saying no because he's not told to, and it's such a strange situation. Yeah. So is it that Jacob believes that this is how it will come about and that God will bless me through that?
Or is it a sign that God is going to bless it?
I don't know, but either way, God does do that.
Right.
And I think the text actually does say that God blesses Jacob and he and his flocks increase, such that Laban's sons are claiming that Jacob has stolen their father's inheritance, or not inheritance, but wealth and blessing, because his flocks have so diminished now that Jacob's not overseeing them.
Yeah.
And Jacob's flocks have so increased.
Yeah.
And it's, there's something interesting here about the one that you wouldn't choose being chosen and being blessed. Of course, that's mapping on what's going on here too. But no, I don't know if this is divination or if this is some kind of.
It just seems like it's just on the periphery enough, not defined well enough for us to say like, well, this is what's going on, and we ought not to or whatever. It is strange.
It's strange, and knowing what we know about science now, it should not work.
Yeah.
It should not work.
Yeah.
That this is how it works out.
Which I think is an important thing to point out with what you were saying earlier about why shouldn't we seek to interact with other spiritual beings?
Correct.
Not because it's fake, but because it's real and dangerous.
Yes.
That is wildly different than, if I put these speckled sticks here, then we know that this will happen, blah, blah, blah. That it's not the same.
It's not the same. It's cultural wisdom. Versus beseeching a god. Trusting in another god to make good on something. Cultural wisdom. We have this too, where the old wives' tales. If you put an onion underneath your feet while you sleep, then your toothache will get fixed. I don't know if that's what it is, but you get what I'm trying to say.
I've never heard that one.
In our day, it's the essential oils. If you, if you have the essential oils, I'm not trying to demean nobody. I'm just trying to say.
But I will pray for you.
Just trying to say there's always some kind of cultural thing that just kind of exists in the water. Where if we do this thing, then it has this benefit. And maybe science hasn't proved that yet, but I have seen personally that benefit in my life. So maybe you should try it. I think that's what's going on here.
You were asking for comments. You said something against the essential oils. They're going to come for you now.
Don't come in the comments on that, please.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So then we get to 31.
Yeah.
Now, Jacob, knowing that he has tried to come to Laban multiple times, and I'm trying to like separate from this guy, I'm trying to, do my own thing, Laban won't let me, he keeps changing the narrative, he keeps changing the terms of our agreement. So he flees. So what he does is he gathers up all his possessions, all his people, his 11 sons and his wives, and they get out of Dodge, and they are heading home, trying to sneak out. Okay, Rachel steals Laban's household gods, which is maybe an indication that that's who she worships. We don't know. Okay, that's a safe assumption though, and maybe Jacob participates with that.
I don't even know that, like, as far as what could we assume from that, that her worship or allegiance is to that. Well, even if you said that, like, well, maybe they were items of high value,
It could be that too.
I wouldn't even say could be that separately. I think those would still go together.
Well, it could be that she may not worship them, but she's taking them as a slice of home. She's taking them as...
Which, does that detach you from idolatry?
Of course not.
Enough? Then
of course not.
That's why I'm saying they are
of course not.
knit together in some way.
I agree with you. I agree. So maybe we shouldn't draw too hard a distinction there. Either way, Rachel does that. And so Laban was going to pursue Jacob anyways. But now he's got like a pretense for that pursuit.
Okay, wait, let me do this. Laban is Rachel's dad.
And Leah, yep.
Does she want to go back to Jacob's land?
Oh, interesting.
So is she taking something? So Laban has had multiple attempts at trying to attach himself to Jacob. Does this kind of shackle him to him? Well, no, because she makes an effort to conceal them, so I guess not.
Okay, so, and I'll answer this question. Jacob heard, chapter 31.
Okay.
Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father. Does this sound like a similar scenario with Esau?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Except this time he hasn't stolen the blessing.
Right.
He's just being falsely accused. So this is a different kind of situation. So here's what happens. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. Notice that it's not my God.
Right.
Because it's not all fulfilled yet.
That is very interesting. That, like, God has been showing up quite a bit for this guy, and he's not willing to fully attach himself to it. And we get to, like we said this earlier, he will get to a point where he goes back to Bethel and sets up an altar, but we're not there yet in his formation.
And people want to know why wrestling? This is why.
Okay.
This is why.
God has
because at some point God's got yeah, exactly. God's got to make him tap out. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Where is it? You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, this is verse 6. Yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. That could be an exaggeration, or it could be true. We don't know. Either way, that's kind of what Laban's like. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob, I answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flocks are streaked, speckled, or spotted, for I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel. Okay.
Is this appearance number 2 for Jacob?
It would be.
Okay.
It would be.
I'm just trying to keep count.
Where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Exile language. Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and to our children. So do whatever God has told you. So they're on board.
Okay.
They're actually on board with getting out of Dodge because they have seen the conduct of their father, probably in contradistinction to Jacob's conduct.
Right.
So in some sense, Jacob is redeeming the situation. I mean, you get it. In this,
Yeah.
He's redeemed a bad situation,
right,
making it a little less bad. It's still bad. But they are in agreement to go back with him. And it's interesting that now that they've got kind of like a common enemy.
Yeah.
they're all suddenly on the same page with one another.
Right.
So that's what they do. They leave. But Rachel, it says in verse 19, 19, when Laban had gone to shear sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, crossing the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. So that's the setup right now. So what happens is they're out of there. On the third day, Laban realizes. So he takes chase. Okay? And when he catches up, he's like, dude, why didn't you just tell me you were leaving? And Jacob essentially says, because you weren't going to let me leave.
Right, yeah.
Okay? And he says, okay, fair enough, but you have stolen some of my household gods. Whoever has taken them, I'm going to put to death. So stakes are high. Drama's high. We're on the run. This dude just caught up with us. The sons are, already talking bad about Jacob, which is the pretense for Jacob leaving. Okay, so now God's promise is on, or this stipulation, this relational connection they're trying to have with one another is on the line. Will I get back to my family safe?
Right.
Or to my home safe? Okay. So then Rachel, what she does is pretends that she's on her menstrual cycle, and she hides the household gods underneath her clothes, her robes. Okay, and she does not have to get up to greet her father, even though he asks her to. Yeah. Because she's deceived.
Right.
Okay. So Laban kisses everybody, and they go about their merry way, except they find out that they're about to encounter Esau. It's like the worst road trip ever.
Yeah. He goes from like on the run to working for a guy who's using him on the run, and then runs into his previous conflict.
So do you have any questions in the midst of that kind of story right there?
No. I do find it, I think that's the one thing that I find a little, not the one thing, but a striking thing is that Rachel and Leah are like, do all that God has told you.
Yeah.
And then Rachel reasons in herself like, I'm going to go steal some stuff.
But this is their culture, right? It's like, we believe in lots of gods.
Yeah.
So if that's the God you believe in, fine. I'll believe in that one and this one too.
Okay, and we know that that's what goes with Jacob, because before he returns to Bethel, he tells all of the men who are with him,
get rid of them.
Get rid of your gods and your idols. Right. So you're right. There is a acknowledgement of the God who is doing something for you.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that they've put all that aside yet.
Correct.
Until. Okay.
Until. Now, I do want to point this out in verse 51. Laban also said to Jacob, here is this heap, and here is this pillar I have set up between you and me. Okay, here we have this pillar thing again. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness, that I will not go past this heap to your side to harm you, and you will not go past this heap and pillar to my side to harm me. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, who is his father, the God of their father, judge between us. That's an interesting detail. We didn't know that about Nahor before. So is it that Abraham and Nahor have been talking with one another? I don't know. It's all speculation. It's just interesting. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He offered, by the way, that's an interesting way to name God, in the fear of his father Isaac. Okay, he offered, now there's a whole thing on that, and I need to do some more research because I'm not ready to give an answer about what the heck that means right now. But it's an interesting name that God gets given here.
That's a name?
Yes, it's capitalized in yours. Is it not capitalized in yours?
Yeah. It is. I just didn't notice. I would have just read past it as a
fear of God or whatever. Yeah. No, this is
a name.
A naming moment.
Okay.
He offered a sacrifice there in the hill country and invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them, and he left and returned home. And then what happens next is we find out that they are gonna be meeting with Esau on the way. They're gonna run into him. But what's fascinating about this moment is when God has arranged all the details, when we're walking in step with God, which Jacob is doing. He's got this situation with Rachel and all that stuff, but Jacob is walking with God at this moment. He's doing what he's supposed to do, maybe not the right way, but he is heading to where he's supposed to go. When the right thing happens, which is that there's reconciliation between these two, and they set this pillar up, there is peace. There's peace between these two finally, right? And there's an oath taken, there's worship that happens, a meal is eaten together, and then we go parting our ways, which is also what we saw with Abraham and Abimelech, and Isaac and Abimelech.
Right.
It's just interesting that that's kind of what's happening here with Jacob in this element of the story, but Jacob has to do it with more people because Jacob deceived more people.
Right, yeah.
So that's what's next.
Yeah.
So Jacob sends a bunch of gifts ahead of him. Let's just try to truncate the story as much as we can. Jacob sends a bunch of gifts ahead, He's trying to soften the blow.
Now, I have a question about this. I know that he tells his servants, take this many livestock with you, and then as you encounter them, say that these are a gift to you, and then it's a great grand gesture that hopefully he's assuming his brother is still out to kill him, and that they should tamper him down by the time he gets there.
That's right.
My question is just before Jacob wrestles with God, he sends his servant and his family a different way. And the bit that I'm a little confused about is there's talks about let me split my camp into two. That way if one is overtaken, then the other will be preserved. Is this Jacob trying to at least protect some? Or is he putting distance between him and the danger via cattle and his own family? What's happening?
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
Maybe we should do some research on that. But
I guess if I reread that and was trying to pay attention to, where is the potential danger and where is he sending his wives and his children, I think would tell you something about his character, even at this point.
Yes, I read. How about this? I read it as he's just trying to be wise.
Right.
He's just trying to soften the blow if it does come. Not that he's trying to benefit from splitting the camp, because if that were the case, then that's all he would do. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what he might do is position the other camp to go first, so that they would get attacked first, so that he could come up and either save the day or run away or what. But he doesn't do that. He's sending gifts ahead. I think he knows that the meeting is imminent.
Okay.
And whatever that meeting will look like, I think he's prepared to face that.
Okay.
That's how I read that. Now, am I right? I don't know.
Okay.
But he is sending, culturally speaking, the right kind of envoy to create the right kind of format for that meeting.
Yeah.
In other words, now what's fascinating is that the promise would be that one son would be stronger than.
Yeah.
Jacob's signaling that by being the one who's giving the gifts to the stronger party.
Yeah.
So
That's
I think there's some kind of, fulfillment of what God is saying here or what he said to Rebecca. It feels like forever ago. It was like 3 chapters ago. But I think there's some fulfillment of that going on here. So I read it as Jacob is doing the right thing.
Okay.
He's doing a wise thing.
Right.
Or a prudent thing, maybe.
Yeah. So rather than, you meet me here at noon and we have a showdown, he is sending gifts to, I guess, herald that he is on his way to meet.
Yes. And I want to
and not
make
running
things,
away anymore.
Correct.
Either.
Correct.
Okay.
I want to make things okay between us, and I know I've done wrong to you. So here's my offering to you, as one stronger than me, to have mercy. Or even if it's not that far, let's meet on good ground.
Okay. I guess that. It could be either one, but I'm leaning more towards your side. If there's this caravan of gifts coming, and he says, hey, when you meet his men, tell them that these are a gift from your servant Jacob.
Correct.
There is the ploy of, at least there's distance, and hopefully he'll calm down. But it is it does present itself as not just self-preservation, but also an attempt to reconcile?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Okay.
And I think that Jacob is relieved that is the case when they finally do meet.
Okay.
In other words, he's not continuing to bargain necessarily. I think that there is a relational setup that he is trying to a cooperation with Esau now. I think that is what is on offer there. So all the gifts get sent ahead, and the showdown is set for at least Jacob and Esau, and we don't know, is it going to go good? Is it going to go bad? What's the situation going to look like? Into that anxiety, into that situation, Jacob then spends the night up. That's what we know. We know that he's up. That night, verse 22 of 32, that night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. Okay? And then he sends them across, and then he's left alone. And then, I imagine he's trying to, what am I going to say to him? He's rehearsing what he's going to say. He's trying to figure out, what am I going to do when we meet with one another?
Yeah.
Then a dude jumps on him and they start wrestling. It's like the most unexpected possible thing that can happen. Now, I am going to deal with this in the sermon.
Yeah.
What I think we should say in summary statement, though, is that what occurs is, like we've already been talking about, is that God does name Jacob Israel, one who wrestled with God, okay, and man, and has overcome, okay?
I feel like the "and has overcome" bit doesn't get played a ton, you know?
Yeah.
At least it's not the bit that I'm most familiar with. I always think of like, yes, Jacob wrestled with God, and, you know, he becomes this nation of Israel, and like, let's look at the, you know, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, or the back and forth that this covenant people has with the God who remains faithful to him. All that makes sense to me. But there is a overcoming element.
Yes. And I wish I had like just this neat answer for what that particular element of it means, other than I think that what we're being shown is that Jacob is going to be prosperous in his next pursuit. I think it has less to do with defeat.
That's not how I would at all put having wrestled with God. And by the way, he beat him.
Correct.
I would see it more as like, you know, this tension between allegiances and willings and motives and coming to a resolve that puts you, you know, and we're watching him do it. He's trying to reconcile with his brother.
Right.
He's also about to make a pointed effort to walk with God.
That's right.
And that's how not in a I beat God, but I reason in myself to be aligned with God.
Well, and if formation is what God is setting up, then it's not inappropriate to have overcome something.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not an inappropriate way of billing what a relationship with God could look like. Not that I've overcome God, but that with God's help I am able to overcome.
Right. And you'd said something like this a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, in that is blessing the only thing that forms you?
Right. No, of course not.
Absolutely not. So I think it all tracks.
Yeah. So we're going to deal with this.
Okay.
But this is a fascinating moment, and I've got quite a bit to say for the sermon. I love the idea that that God just and anyway, and we're gonna talk about that more and more. I think what we do for now is let's cap it there. I'm gonna get to the meeting with Esau in chapter 33, and then I'm gonna skip over 34.
Okay.
Which we're going to talk about because it's worth talking about.
Yeah.
It kind of maps on our theme with Leah and Rachel and that whole situation, but actually kind of worse. But we're going to get there.
I'm not looking forward to
it. These are the worst stories in the Bible.
Yeah.
This one and some in Judges. Yeah, it's really difficult stuff. Yeah. But I do get to chapter 35, and so. And then you're going to get into Joseph. But I think what we ought to do is the next time we sit down to do a video, we'll talk through those. We'll go back. Okay. And hopefully in the next 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to already be into the Exodus.
Okay.
So that's our goal.
That's what I'm kind of wondering pacing-wise. If I kind of tackle the first half of Joseph, and I guess I know people are going to come to the church soon and stuff, but where do you want me to stop? I was planning on going from the beginning of the conflict between him and his brothers and all that stuff, up to being in a position post being out of prison.
I think that's a good place to cap.
Okay. And then
because then I can come and finish the story, which gets us into the summary statement of actually, it's kind of cool that this is on camera. Because,
is it still going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because this is what it looks like when we're collaborating on this stuff. Because we are going to get into the main statement of the entire book. Okay. Which is Genesis 50 verse, what is it? Oh boy. Is it 10? I don't know which verse it is. Or 20. That's going to bother me that I don't know. But we're going to get to the kind of summary statement that Joseph makes in regards to what his brothers intended versus what God does. And so that's kind of the summary statement of the entire book of Genesis. And then that's going to lead us narratively into the book of Exodus. And hopefully the goal will be that we really start to speed up. Okay? Hopefully. I mean, there's a lot of detail.
Yeah. One more question while we're talking about forming these next couple of sermons.
Yeah.
Do you want to make a callback, or should I make the callback to the covenant God makes with Abraham when he tells him that your descendants will live in a land that is not their own? Do you want me to tee that up, or do you want to tee that up?
I think you tee it up, and then I'll continue on with it because that is the next element of the story. It shows up both at the beginning of Joseph's story and at the end of Joseph's story. It's worth saying both ways, because the whole reason that the nation of Israel is in Egypt is as a result of what happens in Joseph's story, which was promised already. So I think you tee that up, and then we'll take a swing at that. Yeah, I think that's important. But yeah, you've got a lot of exile in yours.
Yeah.
You got a lot of exile.
A lot of personal exile.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh my. And you know, some of his making, but a lot not.
I would, and we were talking about earlier about, is there this back and forth between ones who are really trying to run away from God and do things on their own terms, or ones who are trying to walk upright? I think Joseph is definitely in the category of one who is trying to do right by God.
I agree.
And he's a son of promise and all this stuff, but why am I... We'll do it.
Keep getting put in exile. I mean, essentially is what it comes down to. Yeah, we're going to talk through all that. Hey, thanks for watching. I know this is a long video, but hopefully you just had like a long, sit down with your friends. Hopefully that's what it felt like. Put any comments, like the video, share it if you want to. Absolutely. I know it'll be long, but if someone's interested in this kind of content, then that would be wonderful for them to experience that as well. Again, if you have any questions or anything like that, come and find Devin or myself and be asking those, because we'd love to address those in upcoming videos. With that, thanks again for another video, man. This is fun.
Thanks.